The inspiration for Illuminary kind of came about in a sideways manner. I've always loved the story of Joseph from the Bible, and have always wanted to write a story kind of exploring the themes and the character arcs of that story. I also happen to love A Little Princess. It is by far my all-time favorite book. And as a result, I've always wanted to play with its story and seeing if I could recapture the magic that that story always brought to me. Well, several years ago, I finally realized Joseph and the Little Princess have the identical story arc of basically a riches to rags to riches story, which provided the fun of kind of mashing the elements of those two stories together, seeing where they crossed, adding my own spin and on it, aging the characters to where I wanted to play with them. And well, from there, things just kind of snowballed, and Illuminary was the result. Technically, Illuminary actually has no chapters. Rather, it has 7 sections to the book. So when you flip through the book, you'll find 7 things that look like this, but no real actual chapters as you traditionally think about it in a book. The reasoning behind this was actually just kind of a whimsical amusement on my part. I had recently read, when I started Illuminary, a book called Calico Bush by Rachel Field. It's a classic children's book. And her book does not have chapters either. And I was impressed with how immersive the story became when it was not being interrupted constantly by a chapter break. So I decided I wanted to try something similar with Illuminary, which seemed to make a lot of sense since the main protagonist is an illuminator and in love with manuscripts and the way they're illustrated, which they wouldn't be broken in the same way in her world. So that was the basic inspiration and idea behind the change in, or the lack of, chapters in Illuminary. I have a lot of the hobbies that I enjoy. I enjoy working with my hands. I crochet, I do cross stitch, I weave. But if I had to pick a favorite hobby, as in referring to the hobby that I can talk the longest on, it's probably Bible study and Bible translation. As you can see, I have just a few books pertaining to that. I'm not sure it really qualifies as a hobby, but I do really love spending a lot of time digging into the scriptures, digging into the words, digging into the root of the meanings, which I then in turn, I end up writing my own Bible study that I teach to a small group of people each week. So that's one of the hobbies that I love. Although I didn't intend it, I actually have several side characters that wrestle with the problem of ostracism, of being pushed to the side, of being ignored, being not mocked simply because they're different. I suspect this idea of not fitting in, not belonging, being different will resonate with a lot of younger readers of Illuminary. I have one pet by the name of Princess Leia Thermopolis. She's a half Siamese, and she's not particularly helpful with the writing. She thinks my sole purpose in life is to give her massages, to scratch her, and generally just provide a warm place to sleep. In addition to my one pet, though, I also do some pet sitting. Some of my regulars are Buddy and Boo, who are a pair of cocker poodles, and Stanley and Billy, who are a pair of dachshunds. They all think they're immensely helpful in the writing process. After all, they'll curl up next to me for emotional support and then drag me outside for a walk when I've been sitting too long. Now, whether I agree with them might be up for debate. But that said, Billy did find his way into Illuminary as the Patakin family dog named Drowser. While I love a good cup of tea in the first thing in the morning, especially a good cup of chai tea, when I'm actually writing, about the only thing I indulge in is a glass of water with a few squirts of lemon in it. It's enough to keep me hydrated and to keep me writing. In a single word, the best way for me to get unstuck is simply prayer. After all, I figure God already knows what the story is supposed to look like in its final form, and He knows what I need to do. So I figure He's the best place to start by asking. So I usually start by just journaling and taking some quiet space to try to just listen and see if something pops. If that doesn't work, it usually moves into moving and praying, taking a walk outside, or just moving around the house, going downstairs to get another drink of water, something like that. While I keep going, well, where do I need to go? Is there something I'm overlooking? If that still doesn't help, it often becomes a question of, okay, is there something I need to be doing differently? Do I need to take a break? Do I need to take a nap? Usually by the time I get through all the different steps of prayer for me, I usually have an idea of what I'm supposed to at least do next, whether it's related to writing or not. And then that usually then leads into getting unstuck with the story itself. I love music. In fact, it's a very rare day when I don't practice piano for at least 30 minutes. However, that said, I can't actually write while listening to music, any kind of music. I learned a few years ago that I'm an auditory writer. I don't see my stories, I hear them. And as a result, the rhythms and the forms of music tend to interfere with that. So, no, I can't write with music. Most of my research is pertaining to the worlds I'm creating. I like to take my worlds and root them in some kind of reality because it provides me a framework with which to work. So, in the case of Illuminary, it's strongly inspired by India and Israel, and it has a very strong leaning in a historical feel of like a Victorian, late Victorian era. So, most of the research I did for the book was like Googling what is a traditional dress in India? Was the fountain pen invented yet in the 1890s? Those are the kinds of things I would research. They're just like one really quick, what does this look like in the real world? So many of the animals, some of the foods, some of the a lot of the clothing are inspired by real things in the real world. I think I would love to take Yossi to the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. When I was there 5 years ago, and I believe they still have the collection, they had a back room in the museum that displayed all of the beautiful Jewish illuminated manuscripts that had been created. And considering Yossi's fascination with all things illuminated, I suspect that she would just love seeing what some of the predecessors to her have done. I admit this question has been really hard for me to try to answer. I think I've made a half a dozen attempts already trying to answer the question because to me, writing is an act of faith. So pulling out one moment where faith played an active part in what I was doing is really difficult for me. For me, faith is supposed to be integrated in every aspect of life, every aspect of the writing process. And this shows up even in the books where my characters interact with their faith on a very regular basis. I mean, they have conversations about God while they're walking down the street. So to pinpoint some particular moment where faith played a significant part is really hard. If I had to pick a moment, it might be after the one weekend. I had a really hard weekend, and I kind of looked at my manuscript and go, my career is over. I'm never going to publish again. Well, obviously that's not true. So it required a lot of faith then to go home after that weekend, pick up the pen, and keep writing. The short answer is no. My favorite genre hasn't changed, partially because I don't have a favorite genre and never have. I've always been an eclectic reader who reads widely and broadly, and I just simply love a good story that is a good story. So even from the youngest age, I enjoyed things like the classic Dr. Seuss, the stories of Peter Maklowski, the tales by Tommy DePaulo, the ever comical Amelia Bedelia. And then I grew up to start reading books on my own, and I enjoyed things like The Littles, The Boxcar Children, My Father's Dragon, The Blue Willow, the ever hilarious Mrs. Pigglewiggle. And I just kept expanding my horizons. I enjoyed Mandy, Miracles on Maple Hill, the science fiction Miss Pickerel books. I guess if you can call them, they're more fiction than science. Prince and the Pauper, Oliver Twist, The Five Little Peppers, and the entire Trailblazers series by the Jacksons. So yeah, my tastes haven't changed much over the years. The most difficult part of writing Illuminary has been writing book 2. That might be a little bit of a cheat, but it's the truth. When I started Illuminary, I fully intended it to be a standalone novel. So when I got halfway through the first book and realized I still hadn't reached a major plot point that would not eventually occur until clear at the end of book 1, I realized I had a story much bigger on my hands than anything I imagined. And so reshaping my vision from a single book to a trilogy has been one of the major challenges of writing the story. It's really hard for me to choose a favorite part of writing Illuminary because the whole book turned out to be a surprisingly fun story to write. But I think if I had to pick just one aspect that I had a lot of extra fun creating, was probably just all the different puzzles for my characters to solve. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about me and a little bit about my new book, Illuminary. It has been such a delight to share a little bit of the behind the scenes, and I hope that you will enjoy following Yossi and Xander on all of their adventures as they try to unravel some puzzles and they spend time with some really cool friends and visit some fun places. So I hope that you enjoy reading Illuminary as much as I had fun writing it.